First task, I talked about being lucky before, and I'm lucky again, because my first job as AILA president is I get to introduce Deputy Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. And I'm thrilled to do so. And introducing him is almost superfluous because I think you all know him, but bear with me. In his first 6 months, I believe he has been particularly busy. We were first introduced to Deputy Secretary Mayorkas in 2009 when he assumed the post of Director of USCIS. As Director, Mr. Mayorkas led a workforce of 18,000 USCIS employees throughout more than 250 offices worldwide and oversaw a $3 billion annual budget. Even I couldn't spend that. Or on shoes, maybe. Over the next few years, he led the agency's implementation of a number of very important programs and enhancements, including deferred action for childhood arrivals, I-601A provisional waiver program, and the rollout of historic changes resulting from the Supreme Court's decision in U.S. versus Windsor, which finally made immigration benefits a reality for married LGBT binational couples. When I look back at this, it really has been a hell of a year. Mr. Mayorkas achieved all of this and much more, while also implementing a number of important reforms that safeguard our nation's security and ensure the integrity of the immigration system. As Deputy Secretary, Mr. Mayorkas oversees the administration of the immigration functions of the Department of Homeland Security. Prior to his appointment at USCIS, Deputy Secretary Mayorkas was a partner in the law firm of O'Melveny & Myers, LLP. In 2008, the National Law Journal recognized Deputy Secretary Mayorkas as one of the 50 most influential minority lawyers in America. He has long been committed to public service, serving as United States Attorney for the Central District of California, Vice Chair of the Attorney General's Advisory Subcommittee on Civil Rights, and as a member of the Subcommittee on Ethics in Government. Deputy Secretary Mayorkas is a graduate of the University of California at Berkeley and received his law degree from Loyola Law School. He has offered to answer limited questions from the audience and after his remarks, so please keep in mind and join me in welcoming our friend and our colleague, Deputy Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas.
Thank you very much. In the past 2 weeks, I have touched the different ends of the spectrum that we define broadly as the immigrant experience in America. From the vulnerable to the privileged, the yearning to the arrived, I've had the opportunity to witness once again what we as a nation can offer and who we as a people can sometimes leave in the shadows. Last week, I was in the Central Valley of California, learning how we can more effectively reach the otherwise disenfranchised youth who are eligible for DACA, but who do not know how to access it, or cannot afford to, or are too afraid to. Only 2 days later, I was in Beverly Hills, California, speaking of a former colleague of mine, the son of an Italian immigrant, who realized the American dream and achieved prominence in the legal profession and in his community. Earlier this week, I had the opportunity to be at the White House celebration of Champions of Change, DACA recipients who have used their opportunity, their chance that the program afforded them to attend Harvard, work for the National Immigration Law Center, build a startup, or otherwise continue on the path of a bright future. I then returned to the office to help address the challenges of the unaccompanied youth from Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. The ends of the spectrum stand far apart from one another, sometimes in time, but certainly in terms of the human condition. What can bring those ends together is us. The term stakeholder is defined as a person or group that has an investment, share, or interest in something. We together are stakeholders in the immigrant experience in America. While you as AILA attorneys might be defined as one group, and my colleagues and I in government as another, whether that is true or not, we share the goal of improving the immigrant experience, and together can define the identity of those who are able to achieve its greatest promise. It is our responsibility in government to enforce the law in a just way and to promote policies that serve that noble end. In the criminal justice system, the Supreme Court decision that guides the United States Attorney's greatest responsibility is the 1935 case of Berger versus United States, in which Justice Sutherland stated the following: "The United States Attorney is the representative not of an ordinary party to a controversy, but of a sovereignty whose obligation to govern impartially is as compelling as its obligation to govern at all, and whose interest, therefore, in a criminal prosecution is not that it shall win a case, but that justice shall be done. As such, he is in a peculiar and very definite sense the servant of the law, the twofold aim of which is that guilt shall not escape or innocence suffer. He may prosecute with earnestness and vigor, indeed he should do so, but while he may strike hard blows, he is not at liberty to strike foul ones. It is as much his duty to refrain from improper methods calculated to produce a wrongful conviction as it is to use every legitimate means to bring about a just one." With equal vigor and dedication, an employee of the Department of Homeland Security should view his or her responsibility in precisely the same way. We in the department must ensure that our administration of immigration law serves justice and does not deliver an injustice. This is true. This is true whether we are conducting our review of deportation policies, assessing conditions in detention centers, drafting adjudication policy, or addressing a single case. Our work is about the life of an individual, whether seeking refuge or pursuing a dream. Our work is also about the identity and values of our nation. For 4 years as the Director of U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, I worked very hard to open and enhance the engagement between our two groups as stakeholders invested in the same enterprise, one that cannot do its best without the investment of the other. Certainly, as a public service agency, USCIS cannot promulgate the soundest policies and develop the most effective operations without the input of the very public it serves, and that includes, of course, all of you. I think that in USCIS we have made public engagement a part of the agency's fabric and means of performance, and I remain dedicated to ensuring that that is a lasting change. Now, from my perspective as the Deputy Secretary, the needed change that lies ahead is of a variation in terms of engagement and more significant in terms of function. That is, namely, to bring the different immigration-related components of the department together to all engage with you more robustly and more openly, and for the agencies to work better together to bring our ideals to the administration of immigration law across the spectrum of our responsibilities. It will not be long before U.S. Customs and Border Protection, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and USCIS all stand before you in areas of overlapping or interlocking responsibility to discuss with you how best we can do our work together, whether it is in the single interpretation of legal terms or decisions, resolving the question of whose adjudicative decision will control when the visa applicant arrives at the port of entry, ensuring consistency in the policies that cut across from one agency to another, or sharing a common view of priorities, whatever the issue or the process that touches the agencies together, you will have the opportunity to engage with them all in previously unprecedented ways, and we will unify these agencies in executing our responsibilities. If you identify a problem, it is our duty to fix it. It is my plan to have ICE and CBP engage with you fully in the spirit of openness and transparency that are hallmarks of good government and significantly in the service of justice. We have a good deal of work ahead. There is also another broader responsibility that we must be sure to fulfill, and that is one of collaboration. As individuals, groups, organizations, or otherwise, we are stakeholders who have the shared interest in the success of the immigrant experience in America. To that end, we must be open with one another, exchange ideas, advocate, agree or disagree, and ultimately work together to realize the promise of whatever decisions we make. The invitation for your voice in the work across our department will arrive soon. In the meantime, and throughout, let us redouble our commitment to comprehensive immigration reform. For those present who aspire and qualify to partake in our nation's dream, and for the future that we collectively envision for the immigration system in which we are all together stakeholders. Thank you very much. I'm happy to take questions. Margaret.
Mr. Mayorkas, my name is Margaret Stock, and I have a question. One of the very important accomplishments—
I think Margaret Stock deserves a round of applause.
You know, that's a really cool tactic for avoiding answering my question.
I've actually only started. Let me just say one more thing. So what better example of the potential, the power of collaboration? Margaret stands before us all with the microphone. Somewhere in this room is Debbie Rogers from U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. Somewhere here, and I can't see. And with Debbie is there. So with Margaret's advocacy and Debbie's passion in U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, and Margaret's passion and Debbie's advocacy within USCIS, a tremendous amount was done for parents of service members in the United States, including parole in place. Would the next person like to ask a question?
I wanted to follow up on your remarks. As you know, one of the singular accomplishments of the administration at USCIS was the issuance of the very wonderful parole in place memo in November 2013, which covers not just parents, but the spouses and children of active duty, selected reservists, and veterans of the United States military.
Yes.
And side note, for lawyers in the room, you need to put this on your intake sheet to make sure you're checking whether all your clients are veterans. This has been a very important development, and I applaud the administration for it. But we're having a little coordination problem now because the memo was issued by USCIS, and USCIS takes the position that if a spouse, child, or parent was in removal proceedings or had an outstanding removal order or somehow is mixed up in the removal system, that USCIS does not have jurisdiction to issue a parole in place. And so they're telling everybody to go talk to ICE. And then ICE says, we never heard of parole in place, what is it? So I'm asking if it's possible in your position as Deputy Secretary now to get the coordination going to make sure that this wonderful policy is reflected in unity of effort across the government, and we have all three of the agencies aware of the parole in place program and applying the same standard. And if I could make a very quick suggestion, I think USCIS is actually best positioned to administer this benefit, and they're the experts on administering it. And it might be best if the Julie Myers memo from 2008 gets adjusted slightly so that USCIS is given the responsibility for issuing parole in place across the board, since it's their policy and they know best how to execute it. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. We will take that for action.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Denise Hammond
Good to see you.
Good to see you, sir. I want to say, and I'm sure I'm not alone in saying that I deeply miss your direct leadership at USCIS. And I know that one of the things that you were very concerned about, and I think you and I have discussed a number of times, is the inconsistency in adjudications, particularly on the non-immigrant side. I practice mostly in the business area. And we are still seeing a regular and predictable culture of no at the California Service Center. And there's a disregard for the standard of proof. We are held to the very high standard that applies in criminal cases. And I just want you to know, and I said this to you, I think, when you moved on up, please keep an eye on us. And the problem persists, and I think that it's evident to everybody who practices on the business side.
Let me ask a question, if I may, because there's been a rather fluid history to engagement with the service centers. Sometimes it's been more robust than at other times. And have you had an opportunity to engage with the California Service Center or any other service center on the issue of the business visas and the business adjudications?
I personally sit on the headquarters liaison, so I don't know the answer to that question. I only assume that we are doing it with California, but what I can tell you is that we're not seeing any results. It's the same and even worse than when you were at the helm. So I'm
not sure how to interpret that.
No, I'm sorry, that was poorly put. No. I want to conclude the way I started by saying I deeply miss your leadership.
Yeah. Duly noted. So let me circle back with the agency and see whether we are engaging on the issues of concern.
Thank you.
I think that would be the first step.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Lisa Brodiaga. I'm with Refugio del Rio Grande, which is a combination refugee camp and law office on the southern border of Texas and Mexico. And I wanted to follow up a little bit on the question of the unaccompanied minors and see if we cannot find some better way of cooperating between the stakeholders, the people who are trying to provide assistance to some of these children, and the people who are holding them and consider lawyers their enemy. There was a group of 61 people who came in a few weeks ago to request asylum. They were with the caravana that went through Mexico. They were from Central America. And there were thousands in the caravan, but there were a group of 61 who came to the border to request asylum. And I was given a call the night before saying, could I please help meet them at the border and facilitate and make sure that they were allowed to request asylum. And I agreed to do so, and when I got there, they were in the line. Apparently, the Border Patrol thought that they were going to try to overrun them with thousands, and they had 500 agents there to prevent them from overrunning them. And I said, no, that's not what's going to happen. They're going to very orderly come through. And they said, well, will you work with us on it? I said, absolutely. So I helped them. They said, well, have them congregate in this parking lot, and then we will take them in and process them. So I did. And as I was doing so, I tried to give out cards to some of them so that they would be able to communicate with us. And they took them inside. They literally took the last one from me as he was signing a G28, and they took them in and they said, now you go away, you're not allowed to talk to them anymore. And there was a group of 13 women and children who did not have any place to go, and I was unable to communicate with them, and never did find out what happened to them. And we had places for them, and now they're being, who knows where they are, where they went. And so it seems to me that when you have stakeholders willing and able and anxious to provide services, the mere fact that the stakeholder is represented by an attorney and CBP thinks the attorneys are their enemy at the border should not preclude that kind of cooperation.
So I have quite a lot to say on this issue, and I'm going to just say a few things. Let me first ask you to see me after we're finished, so that I can take your card. And I so deeply and profoundly appreciate your offer to explore how we can work together with the stakeholders in addressing this urgent situation. So thank you for that. And I think actually I was speaking with Bob Deasy earlier, David Leopold, and we were talking about the same thing, and I think we're going to move forward on that very issue next week. I'm sorry that you had an unfortunate exchange, apparently, with Customs and Border Protection personnel. My experience has been markedly different in the following sense. No, this is very serious, because I woke up this morning to the story of a 12-year-old boy who was for those who make it, there are those who don't to the border. The majority of these children are coming from Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador. And I woke up this morning to the story of a 12-year-old boy who was holding his deceased mother in the middle of the road because she had been hit by a car, and so had his sister, and neither of them made it. And I have seen, in my experience, in going down to that border, I have seen heroic efforts on the part of the CBP officers, because our facilities are not designed, nor are our people necessarily expecting to address several hundred children coming every day to facilities along the border. And I've seen CBP officers go out and buy clothes, food, diapers, bring toys, and do extraordinary things. So while there may be an exchange that is unfortunate and does not make us shine, it is my understanding and experience through vigilant inquiry and robust communication that the overarching story is far, far different in terms of what our folks on the border are doing. This is a very complex challenge. The idea that we can apprehend someone at the border, a child, and turn them over very quickly to a private entity is not that simple, because there are laws that govern the process and the placement of children is a process and a responsibility that requires a profound care for reasons I think that we will have unanimity on. So if there are process improvements and if there's a partnership that we can exploit in the best sense of the term, in terms of the humanitarian commitment of your organization and the humanitarian aspirations of what we are addressing right now, then let's work together and make that happen. And I'm going to be very eager to see you after we're done.
Well, I would like to say, though, that I have also had positive experiences with CBP. A few weeks ago, they saved the life of a colleague of mine who had a heart attack while he was standing in line waiting to be administered or to be entered. And they gave him mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, and he had a quintuple bypass, and he's now doing very well. So I am not damning or painting, all of CBP with that brush. I'm just saying that, there are issues that I think we can improve on.
And there are many challenges that this situation, and it's not only unaccompanied children. We are seeing a tremendous flow of families coming across the border. We're also seeing adults, this is a situation that the department as a whole is extraordinarily focused on.
Yeah, well, it was the families, the women and children units that we were offering to provide, not the unaccompanied minors, because we're not certified to deal with the unaccompanied minors.
Thank you. So I'll look forward to speaking with you in a few minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Secretary. My name is George Lester. I'm an immigration lawyer here in Boston. I practice in business and family, and obviously there's lots of things we could bring up on processing delays and issues. But the one thing I want to ask about and ask if you can do something to address is the extraordinary long time it takes for a U.S. citizen to simply bring a spouse from outside the U.S. to come into the U.S. Now this comes up in two ways. One is the citizen is in the U.S. and is married and is trying to bring the spouse in from outside. It also comes up when the U.S. citizen and spouse have been married and living together outside the U.S., perhaps on an expat assignment, and then they just simply want to relocate in. Right now, it takes 8 months to get an I-130 petition approved, another 2 to 4 months to go through the visa process for an immigrant visa, and it just shouldn't take a year for if you have a couple that's been married 20 years, has U.S. citizen children, may have been living in Spain on an expat job and just want to move back to the U.S. It shouldn't take a year where they're separated and in limbo status. So I want to ask if you can do something to address that. There was some in the past when couples lived outside the U.S. like that, they could process entirely at the U.S. Consulate. Right now, that's restricted to London and 1 or 2 other places. So if you're so it can take over a year, and it's just not fair, and it breaks up families. So
the process changed. So with respect to the filing of the I-130, so I know that we endured a backlog on the I-130s over the past year, and it is my understanding, and I think our goal is an average of about 5 months, or so. It's been a little while, I just don't recall, but much shorter than a year and shorter than 8 months. And a backlog was created, and I can certainly speak of the reasons why. But it is my understanding that we've worked that backlog down, and the processing times are current. So hopefully your experience at present and going forward will not be that the I-130s are taking that period of time. But I'll make sure to check on that. We did have a backlog, and they were taking 8 months to a year, but that should no longer be the case.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you, Deputy Secretary. That's my understanding. Is this on? No.
Thank you all very much. I'm getting the hook. Thank you.